The good, the bad and the ugly. That's basically my experience using the Motorola G22. So I'm just going to go through some of the points of my experience with this phone in this video. So if you're interested, stick around. The phone has a really nice aesthetic design. I've got it in iceberg blue. It's a matte plastic back with a nice metallic-y reflective look, especially when it catches the light the right way. And the fact that the phone is made of plastic, of course, isn't a bad thing and to be expected at such a low price. There's minimal branding on the back, a bit of writing at the bottom and the standard Motorola logo in the middle, and the 50 megapixel quad camera system in the top left hand corner. The sides of the phone are again made of plastic, but these overall give the phone a nice look and feel to it. And up top there's a headphone jack, which of course is a good thing. So if I quickly talk a little bit more about the cameras, you get a 50 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, and then just the standard 2 megapixel macro and depth cameras. This is about the standard for budget phones camera specs, but the results are actually pretty good given the low price. Photos come out with plenty of detail and natural colour reproduction. HDR actually does a decent job controlling light and darker areas, even though it's not usually noticeable until after the photo has saved. The ultra wide is okay too, but with certain photos there is a noticeable change in colour temperature, often on the cooler side, but at the same time sometimes a little bit more saturated, so there is a little bit of inconsistency with the ultra wide camera and the main camera, but the photos are perfectly usable. The 16 megapixel selfie camera is respectable too, with the portrait mode offering good subject separation. But one thing to note is that HDR isn't supported on portrait mode, so the harshly lit areas will still come out blown out. And the G22 also comes with a 5000 mAh battery, so you can achieve all day battery life no problem. So now let's talk a little bit about the bad things with the Motorola G22. Now we'll start with the display. It's a 6.5 inch HD display with a 720p resolution and a 90 Hz refresh rate. Now on paper, the Motorola G22's display does fit in with a lot of other budget phones on the market. And although being 90 Hz, unfortunately, it does feel like I'm using a 60 Hz panel. It doesn't feel that smooth, so much so that my Realme C35 that has a standard 60 Hz panel actually feels a lot smoother and more responsive than what I have found on the G22. And the G22's maximum brightness is pretty low, so outdoor visibility I found to not be that great. And the 720p panel, now I used to say in older videos, maybe last year, that going back to a 720p panel is not a big deal, but it would have been nice to have a 1080p panel. I do find myself noticing it a lot more these days than what I did back then, but the 720p is still perfectly usable for most people, but it would have been nice to have a 1080p display. Now, it's a good job the Motorola G22 has really great battery life, because the poor 15-watt charging speeds won't get you charged up very quickly if you're in a rush. Of course, if you're charging the phone up overnight, it's not going to be an issue. And I know Motorola, especially on their very budget devices, aren't known for having fast charging or anything like that. But when you've got a few Xiaomi phones that cost similar money to have 30 or 33 watt fast charging, it would have been nice to have something a little bit quicker on the G22, but unfortunately you don't get that here. And things like 4 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of base storage, you can't really complain about at this price point. And there is micro SD card support to expand that storage if you do run low. So that is, of course, a good thing to have. So now I move on to the ugly part of this video, and you've probably guessed what it's going to be. And of course, it's the performance on the Motorola G22. So it comes back in a 12 nanometer MediaTek Helio G37 processor with that aforementioned 4 gigabytes of RAM. And I found this to be basically the bare minimum to run Android on a smartphone. Even just day-to-day scrolling through the interface feels sluggish. And of course, despite having a 90 Hz display, it just feels really slow. Display isn't the most responsive, so I have found a couple of times tapping the display a couple of times to get it to recognize what I'm doing. Overall, I've just not been impressed at all with the performance of the G22. Now, going by Geekbench scores, from memory, it's probably the lowest that I've recorded on a smartphone that I've tested. I can't remember exactly, but I think it scored even lower than the Snapdragon 460 processor found in the Motorola G10 that I reviewed way back last year. So that is one thing that I have found has been really disappointing on the Motorola G22. So for those people that want something that will do more than just run day-to-day, very, very basic tasks, the G22 isn't going to be for you. Of course, if you've got a G22, let me know if you found your experience to be a little bit different. But personally for me, I have found it to be a little bit frustrating with everyday use. If you're a gamer, I would definitely try and go for something else. So that's my quick look at the Motorola G22. Like I said before, let me know in the comments what you think of this phone. As far as the design goes, it's really nice. I love this color and I love how it looks. The camera is decent. The screen is okay, but the brightness of it is a bit of a disappointment. And then of course that performance is just not good enough for what I want personally. But let me know in the comments if it's enough for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy videos like this. And hopefully I will see you in the next one.